Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to come and talk to you this afternoon, and I'm not going to give you the standard corporate presentation, and I make no apologies for that. What I'm going to be doing is giving you a very brief and abbreviated history of the AK6 kimberlite, or the Karowe mine as it's now called, particularly from the perspective of the lessons learned and how we've adapted those lessons for Botswana diamonds. The title of my talk is a little bit different from that in the program. It's how a junior developed a billion-dollar asset and a major walked away. I'm going to cover 5 main points. I'm going to start with the end in mind. What is the Karowe mine looking like now? And once you've got that picture in your mind, you can then take that picture back to the early days of the late 60s, through to the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s. And while I talk about the discovery, the reassessment, and the rediscovery, I'm going to concentrate on 3 major areas: the technical component, the corporate component, and vitally, what were the economic conditions or the context of that time? Because so often we forget about what that corporate or economic context was. Then the bulk of my presentation is going to be on reflections. What have we learned from this exercise? And then concluding what it means for Botswana diamonds. So starting today with the end in mind. The Indaba province is probably one of the most prodigious diamond producing provinces in the world. There are 85 kimberlites, of which 8 have been or are diamond mines. And if you recall the statistics from Johan Dippenaar yesterday, 6,000 kimberlites, 600 have diamonds, 60 have been or are diamond mines. This is quite a prodigious area. It has the largest Tier 1 diamond mine in the world, owned and run by Debswana, the joint venture between the government of Botswana and De Beers, the 118-hectare Indaba kimberlite. And in fact, the longer version of this presentation was presented at the 50th anniversary of the discovery of Indaba, which was held in Indaba about 3 weeks ago, where the original discoverer, Manfred Marx, previously of De Beers, came out and told a wonderful story of what was Botswana like at that particular time. So let's look at the economics of Karowe. Karowe sits at an operating margin of just under 60%. So it's halfway through in the top league of diamond producers. But very importantly, it's paid just over $180 million in dividends in its 4 years of operation, including just under $150 million in 2016. So I'm not going to kick off the story about Karowe with beautiful ladies and beautiful diamonds, as I'm sure Bernard would like me to do, but with the economics of it. It's made shareholders a bucket load of money, and I'm going to illustrate that in more detail a bit later. Sorry, Bernard, not to disappoint you. Not only is the Karowe mine highly profitable, it's produced some of the most magnificent diamonds in the world, including the second largest diamond ever, the Lesedi Lerona, going into 1,109 carats. This was not just a one-off. The Karowe mine is very rich in type 2 diamonds, which are the very pure and highly valuable diamonds. And you'll see at the bottom of this slide that 14 exceptional stones over $2 million have been produced and 4 stones over $10 million. And these come out regularly and repeatedly in a high-grade deposit. So truly it is an absolutely magnificent mine. So where did this all start? Now you've got this picture in your mind about this wonderful producer that's making shareholders a lot of money. Well, it all started in 1969, where De Beers discovered the kimberlite at the same time as many of the other kimberlites in the Indaba region. And don't forget, Indaba is 118 hectares. It was considered small, just over 3 hectares, poor mineral chemistry, and low grade. So it was walked away. Unsurprisingly, it was actually walked away. From an economic perspective, it was a period of stagflation, high inflation, slow growth, and high unemployment. There are also various stock market crashes. The De Beers corporate context of that time was a decade of significant mine opening. All 3 of these are in Botswana, Indaba, Letlhakane, and Jwaneng. And for those people who used to watch De Beers many years ago when it was a stock exchange listed company, the stock price was directly linked to the Dow Jones Industrial Index. And as you can see from the middle section, that had collapsed, and so had the De Beers share price. Fast forward to the rediscovery and the reevaluation, some 30 or more years later. With the advent of new technology, and in particular ground geophysics and large diameter drilling using a relatively non-destructive drilling technique, AK6 was rediscovered. The 2.5 carats per 100 tons became 25. The 2.5 hectares became just under 10 hectares. So a full evaluation exercise was undertaken, spending well over $10 million to arrive at a resource estimate. And that's summarized in the graph on the bottom left-hand corner. Please remember here the $131 a carat against something like $350 a carat, the current run of mine production. One must also not forget about that time that we had the global financial crisis, annus horribilis. It was the end of the mining boom. It was the end of when larger companies started to invest in smaller companies such as African Diamonds and elsewhere. So what did all this mean from a corporate perspective? This is quite a busy slide, but I think it's quite important for you to understand how we arrived at where we arrived today. I'm not going to go through all of it, just to pick out 2 or 3 key points. The first key point was African Diamonds and De Beers had contiguous land holdings near our area. Both believed in the rediscovery of new kimberlites, and that was indeed the case. A joint venture was formed. De Beers was the operator, 51-49, and on delivery of a bankable feasibility study, that would be 70-30. The mining license date approached, and the joint venture applied for a mining license, and De Beers decided it would be the bank, even though sufficient carats were not generated for an indicated resource. That's an important point which I'm going to come back to right at the very, very end. De Beers then applies for a retention license over the project, citing inadequate power and challenges with the marketing regime recommended by the Botswana government. African Diamonds objected to this, launched a High Court action, a mining license was granted. Come along to 2009, De Beers were unable to project finance the operation, so African Diamonds, along with Paradigm Project Management, put together a feasibility study at a substantially lower cost to what De Beers would have done. And the gentleman here on my right talked about Tier 1 versus Tier 3 engineering approaches. And this enabled us to seek an investor through Lucara, and an insider to Lucara basically bought out, using his cash, the De Beers stake. I'll illustrate to you in a few moments what that actually meant at the end of the day. Once that happened, the script and the end story was written, that Lucara would eventually buy out African Diamonds, which they did for a 30% premium. So a few reflections on this. Firstly, from a technical perspective, ground geophysics and large diameter drilling were transformatory in terms of the rediscovery of the AK6 deposit itself, particularly in terms of being able to see a larger deposit and lowering diamond breakage. However, there is still so much to learn from a diamond breakage perspective in the re-evaluation of kimberlites. And that you can see that the resource that we generated from a diamond value perspective was still much lower than what was eventually gained from a production perspective. The abundance of type 2A diamonds, the Lacerdi Lorona, all the diamonds that went over $2 million and $10 million was underestimated. And that value became very, very significant. And then finally on this particular slide, I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but there are 2 different diamond pricing methodologies. There's a fixed price system which works well over a long period of time in a stable market, and there is an open tender or transparent system, which gives very different results in a strongly upwardly moving market and a strong downwardly moving markets. From a corporate perspective, very clearly, there are different philosophies, risk appetite, approaches to decision-making, hurdle rates between a major and a junior. And nowhere is that more clearly illustrated in quantitative forms in terms of the capital approach and the project economics, which is on the right hand of the slide. Here you'll see that the capital approach and the economics which a major had on this project and that which African Diamonds and then Lucara had. And in fact, the Lucara numbers, if one does a retrospect, and I'm sure someone has done it, and if not, someone probably will do it, are probably very conservative in terms of what the eventual results are of this mine. From an economic value perspective, and I'm sure this will be of great interest to many of the financiers here, what was the return to African Diamonds shareholders? My chairman mentioned this yesterday. It was essentially 25 times your money plus shares in Botswana Diamonds. From a Lucara perspective, this is 40 times an increase in market capitalization. So this has been a very handsome investors, particularly for your early stage investors in African Diamonds. And as we know, those are people who are chiefly not in this audience, but friends and family. And even when Lucara picked this up for $49 million, it's been a fantastic investment for them too. So in summary, ladies and gentlemen, I try and like to keep my conclusions relatively short. And here I've got 5 major points. Very clearly, they're contrasting strategic, corporate, and financial agendas between a major and a junior. And perhaps one should ask the question, can they actually ever work together because of that? Secondly, the blindingly obvious. And it's a shame that not many of us actually apply this when we go through the economic downturns. Cash is king, especially at the bottom of the cycle. And it's no wonder someone like Lucas Lundin, the Lundin Group, has actually done so well from this perspective. And thirdly, one must never underestimate different diamond pricing methodologies, particularly when they're strongly rising or strongly falling markets. And then 2 points from a technical perspective. Firstly, the point about too small a bulk sample. This has come back, I think, to haunt the original owners of the project itself because it led to possible deficiencies in the understanding of the size frequency distribution, or more importantly, the diamond value. And the final point here, and this was raised yesterday by one of the speakers in terms of what you can't model, you can't do, is that there was an inadequate application of qualitative information. What did people really observe? What did they really understand? And sadly, if you can't model it in today's computer-generated world, you can't actually use it. And I think that's a very sad thing because a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge is actually omitted from that perspective. So how have we put this all into Botswana Diamonds? And what I've attempted to do here gives a poor summary of what John Teeling, our chairman, said actually yesterday. The Botswana Diamonds team is essentially the same team as the African Diamonds team. Strong corporate, technical and commercial skills, significant director and management shareholding, so we've all got a strong interest in what we're actually doing. Notwithstanding our low-budget approach, we partner with the best-in-class consultants, and indeed, if you look at what we're doing in Botswana and South Africa at the moment, these are some of the best geophysicists and drillers you can actually get. And thin overheads. People were talking about offices not in Sandton. Well, actually, we don't have an office. That's, you actually put 99% of more of your money actually in the ground. We're chiefly focused on brownfields areas at the moment, but we're not scared of greenfields. And we're focusing on 2 key addresses, Botswana, the Switzerland of Africa. We've heard this time and time again, not only from a geopolitical perspective, but prospectivity-wise, it still has a lot to give from a diamond side. And also South Africa. This was raised by Mike Scott in his panel actually yesterday. We firmly believe that South Africa is underexplored, but it has phenomenal infrastructure and a strong legacy of diamond mining, which we believe will pave the way for future discoveries and future commercial gain in this country. The application of third-generation technology is absolutely critical because if you are doing the same thing over and over again, you will get the same result. You have to do something differently, you have to think differently, you have to apply different technology. And then very finally, partnerships. We like to work with the best people we actually can. In Botswana, the diamond giant Alrosa, and BCL in some exciting projects in the Central Kalahari. And then in South Africa, with the Vitomi Private Diamond Mining Group, where we recently launched an earning arrangement with some very, very exciting results. So thank you very much indeed for your time, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you enjoyed the brief history of AK6 and Karowe and how we have assimilated that into Botswana Diamonds.
James, thank you, thank you. That was very, very well presented, very slick, professional. My first question comes from me as a non-diamond miner. So why do you get these big stones? Is it geology? Is it mining method? would somebody else have broken them up into smaller things? It's really an ignorant question, but why are you recovering such lovely stones at such a frequency?
It is initially a geological function in that the stones are actually there, but typically when you undertake your bulk sampling, you have a lower top cutoff. In this case, it was 12 millimeters, so the larger stones would have been broken in the evaluation process. And diamond breakage modeling is not sufficiently mature enough to reconstitute those stones from an overall value perspective.
You know, I always told my wife they don't come bigger than 1 carat. So I mean,
Sorry. Sorry.
My other question, and I actually should have asked Stonewall that as well, is so today, could this mine be operated by De Beers, or is it still not the De Beers ore body?
I firmly believe it could be. The operating margins are significant. And I see no reason why it shouldn't have been. The critical issue here was in the underestimation of diamond value.
Understand the ore body.
Understand the ore body.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's do the digi voting on James's presentation. Thank you, sir. Thank you.